What's good, y'all? I am Dennis, and this is Barely Qualified Picks. It's Wednesday, which means we are back at you with another week of college football picks, updated playoff projections. We're going to take a peek at the Heisman race and a lot more. But before we do, I put up a post, a Monday morning quarterback post that I put up Tuesday evening. Nice. In which I talked a little bit more about the coaching carousel in college football. We had a couple more dismissals over the weekend, Jay Norvell at Colorado State, and then, of course, Billy Napier at Florida. And as we look at that situation and try and even figure out what's the best job today, is it Penn State and Happy Valley? Is it Gainesville and the Florida Gators? One of the questions that people have asked me is, well, why is all of this happening? Okay, it's been in this unprecedented avalanche of midseason dismissals. Why is all of this happening? And I alluded to it yesterday that we'll cover the what, but we would cover the why soon. So today I want to cover the why a little bit. And look, not shockingly, you know it's all about the money, right? And maybe not in the way you think, but it always comes back to the money. All these coaches that are getting fired, sure, you could make an argument that the pressure to win has never been higher in college football or in life more generally. It just feels like the stakes are higher than ever around the world, in your backyard, in professional, personal, every facet of life. At the same time, with social media and all of the different polls that we have on our time and our attention, it feels like our attention spans and our patience have never been shorter. And when you think about the college football landscape and the transfer rules and the impact that social media and boosters and fans and even players recruiting one another have had, the access and the influence is greater than it's ever been when it comes to the major hiring and firing decisions that athletic departments have to make and are making right now, week in and week out. But don't lose sight of what's actually underlying this mind-bending shift in college football that's happening right before our very eyes. It's not necessarily new tech or social media. Those are symptoms, but not the root cause. And it's not fan and booster access or engagement. It's much simpler than that. KISS, keep it simple, stupid. It's the presence of immense amounts of new money in the sport, NIL money to be exact. And if the big four pro sports in the U.S. have taught us anything, the sums of money on the table today are only likely to increase in the coming years, probably in mind-boggling ways that are going to have more groundbreaking shifts in the way the sport operates, the players that are in the sport, the way coaches have to think and operate. And yes, we expect that there's going to be more change in the future, but let's not pretend like there hasn't already been a big shift. The money has already changed everything in college football, including and especially the fundamental dynamics, requirements, and expectations of the major college football head coaching profession. It's changed in the obvious ways, as all this money has come in, and now, there were jokes for many years about SEC teams paid players and it was all behind the scenes, and now it's all out in the open, and whatever degree of truth there was to that, wherever it did or didn't happen, it is now part and parcel of running a major college program today. And, like I said, the obvious stuff is right there. Budgets have to be determined. Fundraising has to be spearheaded. Deals have to be signed. Hands have to be shaken. All of those things add a significant amount of new work to a head coach's already full plate. And sure, they have staff to help with these things. They will inevitably hire more staff to help with these things. But I promise you, just adding more staff doesn't solve the problem. It still creates more work for the people at the top. The head coach has more things they have to keep an eye on. And ultimately, there is always a material tax when you broaden scope for key talent like this. Time is a coach's most precious commodity. All of ours, really. And this is going to eat in to their time. But that's sort of the micro. That's the core game loop of what this money does. Where we really have to look to understand the implications here is the meta of what the money means. And that's where the real paradigm shift lies. College coaches always operated on what seemed like short timelines with players. In a best case, you'd get a guy as a freshman, you'd have him for 5 years with a redshirt year, and then they would move on either to the NFL or they would graduate. Worst case, you'd have them for 3 years because you couldn't leave in the first 3 years and you had to sit out a year if you transferred. So most guys, even if they weren't getting the playing time that they wanted as a freshman or a sophomore, they weren't going to up and leave. There was some predictability there. But that's all gone in today's college football with the portal and all of the polls on different players' time and attention, the recruiting that happens above the line, below the line, out in the open, in back alleys. Coaches have to be less orchestra conductor, knowing that they've got, more or less their players in the orchestra from year to year. And now they have to become more like ruthless CEOs in how they manage key boosters, how they build up their NIL funds. If you're watching Chad Powers, I imagine that in real life, it's not that far off in projecting the sense of entitlement that some boosters maintain these days. But coaches have to develop a successful build versus buy strategy. It's not just recruit, and ignore the portal. You can't do that. We've seen the Dabo Sweeneys try and do that. Doesn't work. If you are going to compete today, you have to build a war chest, then you have to spend it smartly. And in that, you have to target both high schoolers who you're evaluating through one lens, and then transfer talent, of which there is more and more and more every year. Every single year, more guys are going to hit the portal. And thus, it's going to be more work for coaches and coaching staffs to evaluate who's who, what's what, and then how they diversify their time across all of the different places that they need to go to build the team that they need to build to have success year in and year out. And make no mistake, that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a year in, year out grind. And as we are seeing this year, when the results aren't there, when a head coach shows that he's not doing all of the things that have to be done to be successful in this era of college football, they're going to be canned. I mean, long ago, when you think back, decades ago, college coaches had one job: train the men and call good enough plays to win the inches that mattered in this cloud of dust game we call football. Then over time, college football became a big business, and head coaches had to add salesmen to their CV alongside developer and motivator of young men. And today, now they must add master FBI negotiator to the list as well. Talk about outsized expectations, and no wonder why so many boosters are willing to pay what it takes to upgrade. That's a unicorn. There aren't a lot of unicorns out there, and I think we're going to see that more and more, that the top coaches, that they can do it all. They can build the rosters. They can be what Bill Belichick always was, right? For the Patriots. He was the GM and he was the head coach. He set the culture. He did it all. That's a lot to ask, and some are going to meet that call. And they're going to earn a ton of money and they're going to enjoy a ton of success. A lot aren't, and they're going to end up earning a pink slip like we're seeing this year. Welcome one and all to what are still the early days of an entirely new and different era in college football. And pay attention, things are going to continue evolving quickly. Now, before we get into our top 5 for the week, let's talk about the playoffs. Some big names worked their way into the top 12 seeding conversation this week, while others worked their way out. Let's take a quick look at where we project the bracket after 8 weeks. First, we've got Ohio State projected as Big Ten champ. They keep rolling with another win and cover in their 34-0 shutout of Wisconsin. I actually thought that line should have been higher than 24.5, but whatever. They easily covered it. Things are going so well that FanDuel has stopped offering a yes-no option on them making the playoffs. It's off the board. They're definitely making the playoffs, and they are a plus 270 option to win the national championship. So, almost 3-1. You're probably not going to see odds this good the rest of the way unless they lose the Big Ten championship. So if you like Ohio State, now's a good time to place that national championship bet. There's a good reason why you might not place that bet. That could be the Indiana Hoosiers. For my money, they are the most attractive bet on the board to win the national championship. I've seen this team play several times. I've seen them play lots of different types of teams, from the Oregons to the Iowas to the Illinois and everybody in between. Curt Cignetti talks and he backs it up. They've got talent at every level. They've got a great scheme. They're still 8-1 to win the national championship. I am thinking really, really hard about potentially going and sprinkling a little bit more on Indiana to win the national championship before these odds get to a place that's less appetizing. They are considered a lock, essentially, to make the playoffs. They're minus 3,500 to make the playoffs, so you've got to lay $3,500 just to win 100. There is no value in that for anybody. Let's make no mistake. But Indiana, very much the second seed right now in the country, especially as Miami fell. We'll get to that in a second. Our third seed, we have moved Alabama up. We still have them projected as the SEC champ. They took care of business at home against Tennessee, 37-20. They doubled up the 8.5-point line. The Tide currently have the second best odds to win it all. But I will say, that feels a little weird when you consider what we've seen from Indiana this year. Give me Curt Cignetti over Kalen DeBoer in what would be an incredibly fun playoff matchup. The Tide are plus 650 to win it all, minus 750 to make the playoff. Right behind Alabama, in the 4 seed, we have our second wild card, the Georgia Bulldogs. The Georgia Bulldogs notched an impressive win over Ole Miss, 43-35 last weekend, but they can't rest because their remaining schedule is much more difficult than, say, Indiana's. Have you heard that before? Georgia hosts a Florida Gator team in its first game under an interim staff, aka who knows, and then is at Mississippi State. They're home to Texas, and then they're home for their rivalry game with Georgia Tech to close the regular season. Manageable, but not easy. I suspect that Georgia is going to get it done. If they get in the playoff, who knows? Don't love Gunnar Stockton at quarterback, but didn't love Carson Beck either. Georgia has a lot of weapons, so plus 1100s feels like good odds today. I'm not sure what will happen with those odds. They might actually get longer before they get shorter. So, not saying that you should go bet that today, but if you like Georgia, it'll be interesting to see how Georgia navigates this schedule. For now, we have them as the 4 seed. Right behind Georgia, we have our beloved Oregon Ducks in the 5 seed. They are minus 480 to make the playoffs. So pretty good confidence that they're going to be a playoff team, and they're plus 950 to win the national championship. Gotta say, until I see that long passing game open up, until I see the offense be able to take the top off of these defenses, and they've got to do that in every game going forward, that national championship bet just doesn't feel great knowing that Ohio State and Indiana loom. The line this weekend against Wisconsin is 33.5. So anything less than a 40-plus point performance from the Ducks and anything more than a 10-point performance or so from the Badgers is going to be less than impressive. The Ducks need to win. They need to win big. They need to cover. And really, it's not just about style points with Oregon. The Ducks have to show that they have a dynamic enough offense to force defenses to play 2 high safeties, to give the running game room to work. We just haven't seen that as much lately. Will we? Time will tell. In the 6th seed, there's not a lot of confidence in the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. They are plus 164 to make the playoffs, despite being the leader in the clubhouse in the ACC, and they are plus 12,500 to win the national championship. That one I get more. Miami has fallen. Another shall rise. This is who we've got projected as ACC champ now in the 6th seed slot. Coming off of a very quality win at Duke, in which Georgia Tech also covered, though, we should say that they covered that game largely going back to that first possession where Duke fumbled going into the end zone. Georgia Tech ran it all the way back for a score, and that was the difference in the football game. But I think you've got to give Georgia Tech credit where credit's due. Brent Key is a great coach. He keeps winning the games that matter, and he's not losing the ones that don't. The next 2 are on the road, but they are against opponents over which the Jackets should be double-digit favorites. And really, Georgia Tech's season comes down to their last 2 regular season games against a very plucky Pitt team with a freshman quarterback who may not know better, and against the Georgia Bulldogs. If Georgia Tech can win the Pitt game and they don't stumble along the way, then they're a lock, essentially, to make the ACC championship game. If they don't beat Georgia, they could still make the playoff. If they beat Georgia it might not even matter what happens in the ACC championship game. If they beat Pitt and Georgia, you got to imagine they're just in. So Georgia Tech knows what it has to do. It's got its path right in front of it. Let's see if they can get there. Right behind Georgia Tech, we have the Miami Hurricanes, our fourth wild card in the 7th seed. Playoffs minus 265, so still confidence that Miami will get there. National championship plus 1,600, less confident that Miami has the ability to win the national championship. Those are precipitously lower odds that Miami had a week ago before losing to Louisville. And look, that wasn't a surprise to us. To quote legendary coach and fellow member of the Denny Mafia, Denny Green, they are who we thought they were. I had a strong suspicion that Miami might lose this game. I didn't say it. I didn't bet it. Wish I had put that one on the board. But if not this one, I thought that it would be another one of these remaining games that nobody else would have expected that they'd have lost. Well, this one cost Miami, and it's not something that a few Cubano sandwiches among friends are going to fix. The Hurricanes fell from pole position to middle of the pack, truly like 8th or 9th in the ACC with their now 2-1 conference record. And while they will be a favorite in every game from here on out, they've got to win and cover all of those games. They cannot stumble again. Another loss, and they're not only out of ACC contention, they're likely out of playoff contention as well. That would be so on brand for Mario Cristobal after the start they had. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't rooting for that outcome. I am. All right, in the 8th seed, a team that I'm rooting for very much. The Vanderbilt Commodores, they got it done at home against LSU. What an impressive win. They haven't convinced everybody. They're a plus 186, I'll call it underdog, to make the playoffs. They're plus 3,300 to win the national championship. This is one of the ones that I think is the most interesting on the board. There's not a lot of belief that Vandy can even make the playoffs, much less win it all. I get that. But I believe in Diego Pavia and company, and I have seen what happens when a quarterback just starts balling out. I think he has that, and I think as the lights get brighter and the stage gets bigger, we could see him take his game to another level. No, he didn't completely ball out at Alabama this year, but I think that was a great learning lesson for him. Sometimes you have to take a small step back to take steps forward. I think that if you look at the path ahead, he's got great learning opportunities and shine opportunities at Texas and at Tennessee. The odds don't seem favorable for them right now, and so maybe now is a great time to grab that playoff number. But if they go beat Texas and Tennessee, I'm sorry. I don't think there's any reason that they can't go into a playoff bracket where they catch a couple of breaks even and win a national championship. In the 9th seed, we have the Cincinnati Bearcats. This has been a great story this year. We've got them projected as the Big 12 champ now that Texas Tech has suffered their first loss of the season. There is a lot of uncertainty around the Big 12 for us. There is with Vegas as well. Cincinnati is a plus 680 underdog to make the playoffs. They're plus 30,000 to win the national championship. Essentially no shot. We like Brendan Sorsby at quarterback, no doubt. He's going to get BYU at home, and that's huge. But the Bearcats also have to go win at Utah and TCU. That is not an easy task. That said, none of the Big 12 contenders do have it easy. We've gone through each of their schedules. Just in the top 5, so ignoring those teams that have 2 losses like Iowa State that we thought could be a player earlier in the season, we project 2 losses for BYU by season's end at Texas Tech and at Cincy. We project 1 loss for Cincy at Utah. Now, they have 1 loss, but it's not a conference loss, so we're talking about conference losses. Could be 2 when you look at their schedule. We project 1 loss for ASU. They've already got that loss, so we think that they are primed to run the table. And then 1 loss for Texas Tech, who also looks in good position, maybe not great position, but good position to win out. Vegas believes it'll be Texas Tech. They're a minus 144 favorite to make the playoff. Consider me wholly uncertain. In the 10th seed, we've got 3 teams to go. We've got the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. They are a minus 280 favorite to make the playoffs, plus 1,100 to win the national championship. So we've got them seeded a bit lower. And I think it's realistic to believe that the committee is not going to seed teams based on what Vegas says the national championship odds are. They're going to seed teams like they always have. They're going to give deference to certain championships and certain strengths of schedule and that sort of thing that don't necessarily reflect who the best teams are with the best chance of winning the championship. And that means that you could find a team seeded as low as 10th, like Notre Dame, when it's all said and done, that has objectively smaller national title odds. Here we have that in back-to-back seeds with number 10 Notre Dame and then our 7th wild card, number 11 Texas A&M. If you like either of these teams, now feels like a really good time to go bet those odds. If you believe that a freshman quarterback like CJ Carr is capable of winning it all, Notre Dame at 11-1 feels juicy. And with no opponent left on the schedule who should pose a real challenge, you've got to imagine those odds are going to get shorter every single week. And they could get significantly shorter, like we saw with the Cincinnati Bengals, who went in the course of beating the Pittsburgh Steelers from 20-1 long shot dogs to win the AFC North to 4.5-1 in 1 week. That could happen with Notre Dame or maybe even Texas A&M as they win some of these games down the stretch. But Texas A&M has a much more difficult path. They've got to go to LSU. They've got to go to Mizzou. They've got South Carolina at home, and then they go to Texas. So we've got them in the 11th seed for right now. But two things are and can be true. That as they move down this schedule, if they keep winning, they're going to stay in the playoff mix, even if we think that they are a little bit overrated right now. But also, those odds aren't going to get better. They're going to get worse for bettors as they win these games and prove themselves. In the 12th seed, we've got the South Florida Bulls as the group of 6 bid for the playoffs. They're plus 140 to make the playoffs right now, plus 30,000 to win the national championship. Nobody thinks that's possible. And look, we said that we would give this spot to undefeated teams until there were none. We changed our mind. Navy is undefeated today, but they are at North Texas, at Notre Dame, home versus South Florida, and home versus Memphis. Of those 4 games, I would bet the under on 1.5 wins, much less going undefeated and staying in pole position for this group of 6 bid. It's just not going to happen. There's no chance in hell Navy gets through that, and we're still talking about Navy as the group of 6 candidate. Who do I really like for this spot? Well, man, I've been eyeing James Madison. I've backed James Madison several times over the last couple of years, and I think that they could make some noise in this group of 6 race. It's going to be really interesting to see how this unfolds over the next few weeks. All right, now before we get to top 5, I want to take a peek at the Heisman race because things are moving week over week. And the race is tightening significantly. Ohio State's Julian Sayin has jumped up. He's now 4-1 to win the Heisman, 3rd in the Heisman odds. But I also think when push comes to shove, we've seen this with Heismans, with NFL MVPs, etc. When you have 2 guys from the same offense, they inevitably steal some votes from each other. And Julian Sayin's success is not even in a small way in part thanks to Jeremiah Smith. And of course, Carnell Tate too. But Jeremiah Smith is on the list. He's going to get votes. He has been incredible since the moment he stepped foot in Columbus. And I think it's going to make it harder for Julian Sayin to win the award, even if Ohio State runs the table, they keep impressing, Sayin puts up big numbers. I think as long as Indiana's Fernando Mendoza keeps playing well, really well, he's playing really, really well for Indiana, I think he's going to get it because nobody's stealing those votes from Fernando Mendoza. Right now, he's the favorite, plus 340 to win the award. And I think that if you like Mendoza, if you like those odds, get him now. Because when you look at Indiana's trends, you look at their burning desire to just barnstorm the entire country and win this whole thing. I think that Mendoza is going to have a couple of more really big games in him, and I think that that's going to cause these odds to get shorter. And I don't see anybody on Indiana's schedule until the Big Ten title game that could realistically upset this Indiana team. Just don't see it happening. Could be wrong. Don't see it happening. So if you like Fernando Mendoza, get him now. If you like Diego Pavia and you think he could go on a run, he's plus 700. And I think it won't be plus 700 with another big performance this week. I think against Mizzou, if he has a big game and balls out, plus 700 becomes more like plus 500, and the race tightens again. Our money for this week, if we're putting money on the table, we're putting it on Mendoza. All right, moving on to Uncle Denny's top 5 picks. We went 2-3 last week, snapping a streak of 2 straight weeks of 3-2 results and pushing our season record to an above 500, 13-12 through 5 weeks. Week 9 is the week. We are primed to have a surge in the win column this week. It starts with Mississippi State, the Bulldogs, plus 7.5 hosting the Texas Longhorns. And this is as much a vote of no confidence for Texas as it is a vote of confidence for Mississippi State. But truly, both of these things can be reality at the same time, and they are. Yes, Texas beat Oklahoma 23-6 in the Red River rivalry game. That was impressive, but it was a win driven by defense, including scoring a defensive touchdown. Texas then went to Kentucky and won 16-13 over a Mark Stoops team that has him on the hot seat, that has not played well in several years, now 9 straight SEC losses. That win is fine at best. But it was also a win almost completely driven by defense, with Arch and the Longhorn offense generating a paltry 179 yards of total offense. Manning completed just 44% of his passes. He had 132 yards through the air and just 4.8 yards per attempt. Can you say check down? Because that's all it was. Kentucky is a good foil, actually, for comparing quarterbacks this year, as they've faced a few of the big names in the SEC. Gunnar Stockton of Georgia, Lenora Sellers of South Carolina, Austin Simmons. Gunnar Stockton completed 65% of his passes, almost 200 yards, touchdown and interception, but he ran wild. 6 carries, 48 yards, 2 touchdowns. Lenora Sellers, also a dual threat quarterback, like Stockton, like Arch Manning. Didn't do as well through the air. Completed 78% of his passes for 153 yards, so he protected the football. But he went 14 for 81 on the ground. And then Austin Simmons had the most productivity, 54% completion rate, 235 yards, but also threw 2 picks. He also had 8 carries for 44 yards and a touchdown on the ground. So the formula seemed pretty simple. Make sure that your quarterback is stretching the defense and making them guess. Add in some RPOs. Do something. That did not happen. Arch Manning had, again, 44% completion rate, 132 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, 12 carries. So more than anybody not named Lenora Sellers. -1 yard and no touchdowns on the ground. Not great, Bob. The Texas defense can keep playing well, but it's not going to matter if Arch doesn't improve. And on the road, in Starksville, why do we think that this is going to be the week where we get a spark and that turns into the fire that Texas has been seeking? Texas hasn't surpassed 23 points against any of their legitimate FBS opponents this season. And even in beating Oklahoma 23-6, as mentioned previously, the offense only accounted for 16 of those points. And this Bulldog defense, it's not a bad unit. They're 5th in the SEC and 30th nationally in pass defense. So they're not going to give up a bunch of big plays. If Texas thought this was the week that Arch was going to grow his yards per attempt, the data says, not so fast, my friend. They're only 14th in the SEC and 98th nationally in rush defense. So Quintravion Wisner, the Texas rush offense, you would think that Texas would seek to exploit that. But again, you would have thought that Texas would have sought to exploit Kentucky's rush defense against quarterbacks. And while they did rush it 12 times, they couldn't figure out a way to do that to save their lives because they got -1 rushing yard out of it. That's not exactly a recipe for a Texas offensive explosion this weekend. So I think, again, on the road, with these Mississippi State fans who are going to be clanging those stupid effing cowbells all game. To be honest, we're going to be surprised if Texas can put up anything more than 24 points on the offensive side of the ball. But we really wouldn't be shocked if Texas is like 14, 17 max. And when you flip the lens, Mississippi State at home in a hospitable environment, yes, they are 0-3. But they have a decent overall resume. They have some positive statistical trends. And in my opinion, they're very much due for their first win. The Bulldogs beat a full-strength ASU team. That's impressive. ASU is very much in the thick of the Big 12 race. They fell 24-20 at Mississippi State in week 2, and that's by far the Bulldogs' most quality win. They easily handled their non-conference business against the Alcorn States and the Northern Illinois and the Southern Misses of the world, and they hung tough with Tennessee, leading 34-27 with 8 minutes to play in regulation before falling apart and dropping that game 41-34 in OT. Not a great end, but if you look at that through 52 minutes, this is a team that hung with Tennessee, which is one of the best teams in the country. And they ran out of time in their comeback last week in Gainesville, but they fell just 23-21. They were very much in that game. Look, I don't think the Mississippi State faithful are going to look back on 2025 as some kind of magical year for the program. But I don't think it's also going to be one where they look back and they feel like the Bulldogs were a total doormat. This is a decent team. They're playing at home. That matters with teams that are in this tier of college football. And I think with 3 home games left, all against ranked SEC foes, this is the most winnable one. I expect that the Bulldogs are going to be up for this game. And I think they're going to bring an offense that is going to be ready to shove the ball down the throats of the opposition. The Bulldogs' offense is decidedly run first. 60% of their plays so far have been run versus pass. And why the hell not? They've got 2 backs with over 80 carries, averaging over 4.6 yards per carry, and each having 2+ touchdowns on the year in Fluff Bothwell. I mean, what a damn name. And Devon Booth. Sorry, Devon Booth. You might have like a great name otherwise, but it's nothing compared to Fluff Bothwell. That said, Mississippi State can throw the ball as well. They don't have huge passing numbers. This is a balanced offense. But when they do, they have a classic big play and chain-moving wide receiver duo in Brennan Thompson, who has 29 receptions for 533 yards, 18.4 yards per catch. That's big play territory, and 4 touchdowns. And then he's complemented by Anthony Evans, who has 42 catches for 471 yards. That's a chain mover, and 2 touchdowns of his own. The Bulldogs might just be 8th in the SEC with 178 yards on the ground. And they might just be 12th through the air, but don't let that fool you. This is an offense with some weapons. Texas defense, by contrast, is 2nd in the SEC against the run, only allowing 83 yards per game, and they're 8th against the pass, so it might seem to behoove State to lean more towards the pass. I'm just not sure that that's right. Texas hasn't faced a rushing attack as talented as the Bulldogs since their opener against an Ohio State team that was just replacing NFL draft picks Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. If we were the Bulldogs, we would make it a point to establish the run and let that set up the pass in this game. Maybe Texas's run D really stands up and you have to pivot early in the game. But at least give that a good faith effort before skewing towards the pass. At the end of the day, Texas may very well win this game. But a 7.5 point spread on the road reflects not just a lot of confidence in the Texas defense, but some level of confidence in their offense as well. Well, whatever the lines makers are smoking, we will take a hard pass, okay? In fact, we like Mississippi State to not just cover, but win outright and knock the Longhorns back out of the top 25. Give us Mississippi State in a 24-23 nail-biter win at home, covering the +7.5. In our second top 5 pick of the week, we've got the Washington State Cougars -1.5 at home against the Max Toledo Rockets. It's a trap. That was my immediate and only response to seeing this line. And look, maybe we fall into the trap here and we regret this come next week's Monday morning quarterback, which hopefully we will get out on Monday and not Tuesday evening. But we're backing WSU here, and I'll tell you why. For starters, the Cougars are a group of Power 4.5 program. They are not some middling MAC group of 6 program. Yes, WSU took it on the chin against UW and North Texas. Those were ugly losses that made us wonder if the portal-ravaged Cougars, RIP John Mateer, were epically bad this year. But they also soundly beat future Pac-12 mate and current Mountain West contender San Diego State 36-13. They won at Colorado State 20-3. And they took both number 4 Ole Miss and number 18 Virginia to the final gun, both on the road no less. You hate to see blowout losses, but again, the resume isn't terrible, and they are much better than the level of competition Toledo has played thus far. We'll get to that in a minute. Plus, WSU is solidly in first place in the current Pac-2. Sure, they're dead last nationally in rushing offense, and they're just 78th in passing offense. And they're 92nd in scoring defense and 77th in rushing defense. But all of those stats have been skewed significantly by both their blowout losses and the stiff competition they've faced in the games that weren't blowouts. You've got to discount those numbers on their face. And one more time, Toledo isn't SDSU or Washington or Ole Miss or Virginia or even North Texas. It's Toledo. And while 4-3 sounds nice on paper, you dig a little deeper and it's a pretty flimsy 4-3. The Rockets lost at Western Michigan, also 4-3. They lost at 3-4 Bowling Green, not exactly a titan of college football. And their best and maybe only decent win is over now 6-2 Western Kentucky. Nobody is writing home bragging about wins over Western Kentucky. They also beat Akron and Kent State, but let's be honest, those wins are worthless in every regard. They hold no profile value. They don't make your team better. They are essentially injury traps that need to be expertly navigated and nothing more. So, lines makers think Toledo has shown enough in these middling MAC wins to essentially be a pick'em across the country in Pullman? I don't get that at all. Yes, the Rockets have a quote-unquote bell cow back in Chip Trianum. He's racked up 600-plus yards on 5.8 yards per carry with 7 touchdowns. But WSU knows that, and they're going to come ready to key in on Chip in the running game. Yes, the Rockets also have a clear number 1 wide receiver on paper in Junior Vandeross II. He's got 45 receptions, 556 yards, and 7 touchdowns. The Cougars also know that. On a team that does not have talent at every position, it is very obvious to Washington State who the 2 guys are they need to take out of the game. And again, one more time, let's say it together. All those numbers are impressive on paper, but Toledo doesn't have better or even equivalent talent to the teams WSU has been crushed by or been competitive with this year. And those Toledo numbers, as a result, have been built up week over week, feasting on crappy max cellar dwellers. That really matters. At the end of the day, WSU is the more talented team with deeper NIL pockets, playing against far better competition thus far. Zevi Eckhouse is a 5th-year senior quarterback. He's completing 68% of his passes for a very respectable 7.1 yards per attempt. He's the better quarterback. They're the better team, and they're at home. Finally, for those of you who've never been to or maybe even heard of Pullman, Washington, this is truly a college town's college town. Martin Stadium is going to be packed on Saturday because fans have little else to do on a college game day Saturday than to go to Martin Stadium, crack a couple of beers, and cheer on the Cougs. If this game were in Toledo, we might stay away. Probably not, but we might. But essentially a moneyline pick at home against a lesser opponent? Come on. Give us the Cougars. WSU 27-21, and it might not be that close, easily covering the 1.5 points. All right, in our third pick of the week, we are going back to Nashville and backing the Vanderbilt Commodores and Super Diego Pavia -2.5 at home to the Mizzou Tigers. In my opinion, just my humble opinion, -2.5 is disrespectful to Pavia and the Commodores when you consider everything they've done this year. It is not a fluke. And coming off of a massive win over LSU, about to welcome a Mizzou team whose best win is either last week at Auburn, who suffered their 4th straight loss in the process, or at home to 3-4 South Carolina, Vandy isn't even a full field goal favorite. I was shocked by this. I thought it would be Vandy -4.5, maybe 5.5. I honestly wasn't going to be surprised if it was Vandy -6.5. Vandy -2.5 feels a little like stealing. We'd say it feels like another trap, but we know better. Vandy has history as a doormat. So much history in that department that it's hard for a lot of folks to wrap their minds around the fact that Vandy is good. The Doors are a legitimate FBS team and playoff contender, though. Football is disproportionately influenced by the quarterback position, and Pavia is our favorite signal caller in the entire country this year. In Diego, we trust. And in fairness, prior to taming the Tigers, Vanderbilt's best win was on the road at South Carolina when South Carolina was ranked 11th in the country. But Vandy today has a marquee win and a pretty stellar report card across the board. Is there risk for a letdown game after last week's big emotional win over LSU? Perhaps. But if Vandy can do that again, 400 yards of offense, 0 turnovers, dominating time of possession, there's no reason they can't win and cover the 2.5 against the Mizzou Tigers, just like they did against the LSU Tigers. Mizzou won't be a cakewalk, though, that's for sure. They're 3rd in the SEC and 13th nationally in pass defense. They're also 3rd in the SEC in rush defense. Defensive end Damon Wilson has 5.5 sacks already, and linebacker Josh Schroeder leads the team with 44 tackles. This, no doubt, is a nasty unit. But they also haven't played a magician quite like Super Pavia before. Mizzou is also coming off a 23-17 double OT road win over Auburn. That's right. It took them 60 minutes and 2 overtimes to get to 23 points, albeit not one that caught nearly the spotlight as Vandy's win over LSU. But while the Tigers got the win the Tigers aside, why are there so many Tigers as school mascots in college football? There have to be more Tigers than anything else, right? Aside over. Quarterback Bo Pribula, who, if you'll remember, is a transfer from Penn State, threw 2 picks, and he was generally not on schedule all game. The reality is the road is a very different environment than home in the SEC. And to that end, it's worth noting that Mizzou played their first 6 games this year all at home. Their first roadie was last week at Auburn, and going into Vandy, where the stadium may be smaller, but the intensity is likely going to be off the charts compared to Auburn. This is their toughest test of the season, including Bama, who Mizzou had the good fortune to play at home. At the end of the day, I believe in Pavia. I believe in the Vandy defense. I believe in the home crowd. Vandy 24-20, just covering the 2.5-point spread. In our 4th of our top 5 picks of the college football week 9 slate, we are taking the Arkansas Razorbacks -2.5 at home against the Auburn Tigers. The big question in Fayetteville this weekend is this: can Bobby Petrino get his first win in his 2nd rodeo in Fayetteville? Or wait, maybe the question is this: can Arkansas get their first win against an SEC opponent this year? Or wait, maybe the question is this: can Arkansas just get their first win against an FBS team this year? That's right. All of those questions are on the table. And spoiler alert, while we do not like Bobby Petrino long-term for the Arkansas job, we do think he is going to ensure that the answer is yes to all 3 of those questions by beating Auburn and covering the 2.5 this Saturday. Look, after a listless start under now fired head coach Sam Pittman, the Razorbacks have locked back-to-back quality losses. What is that? A quality loss is one where you are in the game and where you are playing above the baseline and trends that you've been playing at in prior weeks. The Razorbacks very much did that in losing 34-31 at Tennessee and then 45-42 at home to Texas A&M. Those last-minute losses are especially impressive considering just how uncompetitive Arkansas looked in getting dismantled by Notre Dame 56-13. Now, make no mistake, we are well aware that Arkansas is on a 5-game losing streak. But it's also clear based on the last 2 games alone that Petrino has not only not lost the locker room, he's turned things around motivationally and has the Razorbacks playing at a very competitive level. And that's key because a lot of teams would totally collapse after the gauntlet Arkansas has endured in recent weeks. At Ole Miss, at Memphis, versus Notre Dame, at Tennessee, versus Texas A&M, week after week, no breaks. That's brutal. But it seems that Arkansas has survived, and they are still playing their hearts out. And now they get Auburn, who has a nasty defense, but has an offense in shambles, which has led to their own 4-game losing streak. All to top 20 ranked SEC opponents, but 4 games in a row nonetheless. The Auburn defense, which is 6th in the SEC in scoring, 4th in rushing defense, and only 14th in passing defense, that unit has consistently kept the Tigers in these games. But their offense, which is 13th in scoring, 9th in rushing, and dead last in passing offense, has never even begun to gain the escape velocity needed to get Auburn a W over the last month. That is not a great matchup against an Arkansas offense that in the last 2 games, and I really believe you have to put everything before that aside, Petrino is an offensive mastermind. He has changed the staff. He's changed everything. So I really, as tough as it is to take a 2-game sample size, I think that's all we can look at. And when you look at the 2-game sample size of this Arkansas offense under Petrino, they're averaging 36.5 points against top competition. 511 yards of total offense per game. Exceeded 500 yards in both games. 257 yards passing through the air. Similarly, the only thing the one-dimensional Tigers do well offensively is run the ball with Jackson Arnold and running back Jeremiah Cobb. And that's an edge a veteran coach like Bobby Petrino will absolutely leverage in game planning. Thank you for being so one-dimensional. Auburn might be due. They've lost 4 in a row. But are they more due than Petrino and Arkansas, who, per the above, are very due on the how do are you spectrum? But we suspect the Arkansas defense has enough to put the clamps on what has largely been an anemic Auburn offense. And we believe in Petrino's offensive mastery in continuing the scoring momentum for a 3rd straight week. Bad recipe for Auburn. Prediction, Arkansas 28, Auburn 13. Easy cover, Arkansas minus 2.5. All right, our 5th and final top 5 pick of the week. We've got some others receiving votes, but this is the last official pick. It's going to get us to 5-0 this week. I feel it. It's the Virginia Cavaliers, 10.5-point favorites. It's a lot of points, but it's not scary. And here's why. Because they're playing at North Carolina against the fighting Belichicks, who are arrow pointed down, down, down. Want to take a guess at an aging coach that we do not believe is going to have his team ready to play this week? That's right. It's Bill Belichick and the UNC Tar Heels. The Belichick era is off to a very bumpy start, to say the least. The Tar Heels are 2-4. They're riding a 3-game losing streak, and they have been objectively really bad along the way. They're 17th, dead last in the ACC in scoring offense with just 18.7 points per game. They're 14th in the ACC in rushing offense and dead last in passing offense. And the numbers are actually a little bit worse than that when you double-clicked. We'll get to that. But last we checked, you do have to score to win football games. And you do have to score to cover spreads, even when you're catching a bunch of points. UNC isn't just bad offensively, they're also below average defensively. They're 11th in the conference in scoring defense, allowing 25 points per game. They're 8th in rushing defense and 11th in passing defense. They're 10th in turnover margin with a -2 differential on just 7 takeaways. And there is quite literally no single player who has emerged as a star performer for the Tar Heel defense. Woof. UVA, by contrast, is 3-0 in the ACC, and they are 6-1 overall. They've beaten FSU, they've won at Louisville, and even with a now puzzling stumble at NC State in week 2, the Wahoos have a real shot to reach the ACC title game and the playoff. But they, like many teams, need to glow up a bit in the beauty contest that is the college football playoff race. And this spot against UNC seems like the perfect time to do that, which is why we ain't scared by that double-digit spread. Can UNC slow UVA's high-powered offense down? That is the biggest and most pressing question in this matchup, and we're leaning hard toward no on that one. UVA's offense is first in the ACC in scoring with 40 points per game, third in rushing, and 11th in passing, 46 nationally in passing. This is not a bad passing offense. Chandler Morris may be about as dark horse as a Heisman contender gets, but he does have odds. You bet $100 on Chandler Morris today, you'll win $25,000 if he wins the Heisman. Yes, you heard that right. Now, the WSU game last week was surprisingly low scoring, but that's been the exception for Virginia this year. Dude went for 300 yards on Florida State. He has that in him. And against a defense as bad as UNC, we expect Virginia to find success both on the ground and through the air in this matchup. So, assuming Virginia is able to put up 30-plus points in this game, which might be a generous assumption for the UNC defense, can UNC's offense keep up? We suspect not. Even if the Tar Heels somehow find a groove and outperform their scoring average of 12.3 points per game over the last 3 games by 50%, if they beat that by 50%, we're talking about 17 points. And Virginia would then only need 28 points of their own, over a touchdown less than the 36.5 points per game they're averaging over their last 4 games against ACC opponents in WSU to cover this 10.5 points. That seems to bode well for the Cavaliers. So then you might ask, well, it's at North Carolina. Can the Tar Heel crowd play a role in this one? We doubt that too. Kenan Stadium has a 50,000 seat capacity. It's not the biggest stadium. It's not the loudest stadium, even on its best day. And it has allegedly been sold out for all 3 home games. I know there was a lot of preseason excitement for Bill Belichick. We started looking for pictures from the first few games of the season, and when you look at this game against Richmond, which we've posted on the blog, that is nowhere close to a full stadium. Several losses later, I've got to imagine there will be fewer fans showing up at Kenan Stadium this weekend than showed up in the prior few weekends, and the ones that do are going to be less loud than they were before. This is a lost season for North Carolina. There are a lot of questions to be asked and answered. And we're going to consider this more of a neutral site game as a result, and one in which we believe the fighting Belichicks are going to get steamrolled. Give us Virginia 38-16, covering the 10.5 points. All right, moving into others receiving votes. It was admittedly tough to whittle our choices down to just a top 5 this week. Of course, we never want to spread our bets too far. We don't want to introduce unnecessary risk on our return. That said, if any of the above top 5 don't speak to you and you're looking for another plug-and-play option, consider the following picks I considered before deciding not to pull the trigger this week. First, we've got BYU plus 3.5 at Iowa State. BYU, of course, coming off of a massive Holy War victory over Utah. Not all wins are equal, and this could be the type that creates serious tailwinds for a team like BYU in subsequent weeks. We are Bear believers. Bear Bachmeier is one of those freshmen that seemingly doesn't know or doesn't care to be scared of the big stage and the brightest lights. BYU has a great running game in LJ Martin, a stud number 1 wide receiver in Chase Roberts, a trusty number 2 wide receiver in Parker Kingston, and a big tight end in Carson Ryan. The Cougars also have offensive and defensive lines that can win in the trenches. If BYU's offense plays their game, they're going to be hard to stop. Iowa State's defense is fine, just above middle of the pack in the Big 12 for virtually every statistical category, and the home field advantage in Ames will definitely help make life a little bit harder on the BYU offense. But while Iowa State has pieces we like, they've lost 2 straight, including last week on the road to a Colorado team that we think is objectively a full step below BYU, especially offensively. With Texas Tech's loss, BYU now holds its destiny in its hands. They have the talent and the mettle to go on the road and win games like this one in Ames. And even if BYU doesn't earn the W, we think most possible outcomes for this matchup result in BYU staying within a field goal of Iowa State. We lean BYU plus 3.5. Next, we've got Boise minus 21.5 at Nevada. Ashton Jeanty is gone to the NFL, but Boise is slowly reestablishing themselves as a real contender for the Group of 6 playoff bid. Every Boise win has been by double digits thus far, with an average margin of victory of 24.6 points, and 3 out of 5 of those wins covering the 21.5 that they face in Reno this weekend against Nevada. Boise is second in scoring offense, third in rushing offense, and third in passing offense in the Mountain West. They are a machine offensively. They're also third in passing defense, a bad formula for a Nevada team averaging just 15.6 points per game over their last 5, all of which have been losses. Sure, only 3 of those losses have been by double digits, 44-10 to San Diego State, 31-16 to Western Kentucky, and 46-11 to Penn State, or at least the team formerly known as Penn State. But Nevada's other losses were also to objectively even worse teams than they are. So in short, don't be fooled by a valiant 24-22 outing at Powerhouse, New Mexico. Sarcasm intended. Nevada really sucks. And Boise owns Nevada of late. There was a time, many years ago, where Nevada had really fun teams under Chris Alt and Boise was humming under Hawkins, and these two teams would go head-to-head and have some incredible showdowns. That is not the case lately. The Broncos have won 4 of their last 5 meetings against Nevada, including a 28-21 home win last year. Now, time will tell if the 2025 Broncos are a better team than the 2024 Broncos. But the jury is in on Nevada, and this is a markedly worse team than the 2024 Wolfpack. They've fallen from 8th in the Mountain West to 12th in scoring offense. They've fallen from 7th to 11th in turnover margin, and they've fallen from 2nd to 6th in passing defense. All of those metrics matter against Maddox Madsen and a Boise offense that has thrown for 1,823 yards on a stellar 8.1 yards per attempt. The Broncos are not afraid to go deep, and they've done that, generating 15 touchdowns against just 6 interceptions. Running back Dylan Riley has filled in admirably for Ashton Jeanty, generating 695 yards on 8.1 yards per carry with a long run of 77 yards and 6 touchdowns. Madsen also has 3 different receivers with 20-plus catches, 13.5 yards per catch or better, and 2+ touchdowns. I'll say it again. This is a dangerous offense. And finally, Boise loves playing on the big stage. They ache for it. And this is not a big stage game. But this is a game that they have to win and win big to earn their way back onto the big stage with 2 losses. They've gotten a taste for it over the years, and everyone in Idaho wants to get back to this playoff. The coaches, the players, the administration, and definitely the fans. For Boise to break through in the Group of 6 playoff race, they need some help, but they also must crush. And crush they will at Nevada, I suspect. I lean Boise big in covering the 21.5, something like 48-7. And then finally, we've got the San Diego State Aztecs minus 2.5 at Fresno State. I really wanted to put this one in the top 5. I still wonder if I should have. These are 2 very different teams in a very different climate zone, but sharing some similarities to the Washington State Toledo game that we just talked about previously. In a word, San Diego State is tested, like WSU. In a word, Fresno State is overrated, like Toledo. San Diego State's profile has grown stronger week by week, most recently in their destruction of Nevada, 44-10, ahead of their bye last week. With that win, in which the Aztecs generated 409 yards of offense behind the trio of quarterback Jaden Denegal, running back Lucky Sutton, and wide receiver Jordan Napier, the Aztecs have closed the gap on Boise and are now 5-1 underdogs to win the Mountain West. San Diego State hosts Boise on November 15th in what could be a winner-take-all for the conference title and a significant boost in the playoff race. San Diego State, for their part, remain first in the conference in every major defensive category. What Boise State is on offense, San Diego State is that on defense, maybe even on steroids. They're also top 5 in every category offensively except for passing offense. So they're doing it on both sides of the ball. And they do have a solid passing game with a wide receiver one that they can rely on consistently in Napier. That is huge. Fresno, meanwhile, is 5-2, but coming off of a beatdown at the hands of Colorado State, which wasn't impressed enough with that performance or any others this year to not fire Jay Norvell mid-season. The Fresno State Bulldogs are now riding a Charmin soft 5-game win streak that seemingly has created false impressions of what this team is and isn't. What it is, a decent team that can play good ball in stretches. What it isn't, ready to meet the Aztecs at the level they're playing at right now. So false credibility or not, Fresno State is 5-2. And San Diego State knows that. This is the toughest, arguably, of their 3 remaining road games. I suspect they too will be ready. Give me San Diego State minus 2.5 in a game that is probably closer than the final score reflects. San Diego State 28-21. That's all we've got for this week in our college football picks. We will be back with you tomorrow with another round of NFL picks and insights. As always, may the betting gods bless your picks and be on your side. We'll see you again soon, friends.